Okay. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Trevor Timchuk, and I'm with the Provincial Human Services and Justice Coordinating Committee. Just to start with a few housekeeping items, attendees, your cameras and mics are automatically turned off, so you don't have to worry about that. If you have questions during the presentation, whether they're questions about the presentation or any technical issues, you can use the chat or the Q&A to ask your questions. The questions for the presenter will be at the end of the webinar. So you can type your questions in during the webinar and we'll get to them at the end, or as many as we can. The webinar is being recorded. The recording and the PowerPoint presentation will be emailed to you following, and there will also be a brief evaluation survey that we would love it if you filled it out. The HSJCC network is comprised of 39 local committees, 14 regional committees, and 1 provincial committee. Each HSJCC is a voluntary collaboration between health and social service organizations, community mental health and addictions organizations, and partners from the justice sector, including Crown attorneys, judges, police services, and correctional service providers. Our presenter today is Stacey Love-Jolicoeur, who is an independent education and mental health support professional. She is the Chief Operating Director of SEGA LGBTQ Education and Support Services of Canada. She's also under contract to Correction Services Canada, Canadian Mental Health Association, Solicitor General of Ontario, Parole Board of Canada, Canadian Human Rights Commission. For the last 10 years, Stacey has been the coordinator and facilitator for the Transforum Group in Belleville, Ontario. She is also active as a member of the organizing committee of the Belleville's Bay of Quinte Pride Parade and Pride in the Park for the last 8 years. She is a two-spirited Métis Trans woman with a strong passion for the betterment of the LGBTQ2S community. In addition to her work, she also provides workshops and lectures to companies, organizations, and service agencies in support of the LGBTQ2S community. Her passion and insight into LGBTQS issues is welcomed resource to the many groups that she works with. And I'm really excited to turn it over to Stacey for this presentation.
Thank you so much, Trevor. So welcome everybody, and thank you so much for attending today. I look forward to being here for you. And just as a reminder, as Trevor mentioned, if you have a question or a concern, Q&A chat box. We're going to begin by acknowledging the traditional territories upon which we are gathered here today. For many thousands of years, my people of the First Nations have sought to walk gently on our lands. And over the years, we have aided European travelers in this territory and shared our knowledge of at certain times has been very harsh climates. Today, we seek a new relationship with all people of the land, one that is based on honor and great respect. This is my bio. I'm not going to read it all. It's very in-depth. It is available to you as a handout, which will be provided to you after the presentation. Time for a little bit of inclusive education for you so that you're prepared when you meet somebody from the LGBT community.
It's a global flashpoint for equal rights, born in a New York City bar. Take me back to 1969. What was this place like?
It was a dump. It was a burned-out bar that the mafia came in and painted everything black, opened up the doors, and made money.
The Stonewall Inn, like almost all underground bars that catered to gay clientele at the time, was run by organized crime. But the LGBTQ community in the late 60s had few other options. How important was this place to you and your friends back then?
Well, it was important because we could dance with each other. Remember, it was against the law to serve known homosexuals alcohol in New York City.
The last week of June 1969, an increasingly impatient NYPD raided the Stonewall multiple times. And on Friday, June 28th, its oppressed clientele, many transgender, minority, or poor, had enough. Did it feel like every other raid that you had experienced up until that point?
No, because the neighborhood cops always raided the bar, and they would walk in and say, "All right, girls, line up." And we'd line up as usual, but they came in nasty, hollering and pushing and shoving. And they hit somebody, and somebody hit back, and that started the whole thing.
At times, the Stonewall riots were actually lighthearted, but the underlying anger also sparked outbursts of violence. The officer who led the raid spoke to Today in 1994.
You must understand that these were kids who were out for a good time, and we spoiled it.
And then what happened when you came out here that night?
Well, after that, they broke the windows. We threw garbage cans through the window. We fought back. We shake police cars. We broke paddy wagon locks.
Police presence and LGBTQ resistance persisted for several nights, with dozens of arrests and injuries. The NYPD shut down the Stonewall Inn for good, but a movement was born, and the struggle for mere survival or acceptance pivoted into gay pride, held on the anniversary of the uprising. The building itself changed hands and businesses for decades before its current owners stepped in with an eye on preserving history.
It wasn't being treated with the respect it should have been. This is where pride began. So we had to bring it back to that status. We didn't want to make it a museum, but we also wanted everyone to know the history.
That history is still being made. Stonewall has transformed into a mecca and a sanctuary. For mourning, like after the Pulse massacre, and for celebration, like after the Supreme Court legalized gay marriage. Yeah, to some degree, this has become, for the LGBTQ community, a kind of emotional ground zero, isn't it?
Absolutely. It really has become that symbol of gay rights around the world. We get visitors from everywhere you can think of. And I think when you talk about Stonewall, it resonates now because people are understanding exactly what happened here.
Tree, who was a customer at the Stonewall when the uprising happened, is now a bartender here and a living piece of its history.
I was very proud that I'm here. It's my second family. My home, and here.
In 2016, President Obama named the area outside the Stonewall a national park, the first to recognize the LGBTQ community. Pride is now a worldwide celebration, a community of millions of individuals, but its spiritual birthplace is this corner in New York's West Village.
This is a place where people can come to mourn. It's a place where people can come rejoice. It's a safe haven for everybody. The straight allies also.
It's a piece of history. It's part of an education.
We don't take it lightly. We understand that we're the innkeepers of history, and that's a big responsibility.
So a little bit about me. I first identified in 1967 when I was 9 years of age. Today, I'm 62. So I've been trans for a long, long time. However, in 1967, when I identified at the age of 9, it was thought that I was mentally ill. And my parents and their caregivers, I guess, or medical professionals at the time, put me in a conversion therapy program in a mental institution where I spent 3 years incarcerated as a child without anybody to support me. I was released at the age of 12, and I say released because I really felt like I was in prison. And I was thrown back into my parents' hands, my bigoted parents' hands, who had no conception of trans or any desire to find out about it because of their acute Catholicism. At the age of 14, so 2 years later, I was participating in the first ever Toronto Gay March. And I got arrested. I got arrested because I wore a dress. They charged me with disturbing the peace because I wore a dress. I was kicked out. My parents were called, and my father came to get me at the police station. And, you know, I come from a big family of 11 brothers and sisters, so we always had a big car. But he came by himself, and it was the quietest ride I'd ever had in that car. And the sad part of this story is that when he got me home, he beat the living crap out of me and threw me through the back door and told me to get out of his life. And I never saw that man again. I was rejected by my family, and my father died a few years later as I was living on the streets in Toronto. I dumpster dove. I slept in underground parking lots and in parkways. I know what that's like. I was raped. I was not supported whatsoever. I experienced tremendous amounts of bigotry and discrimination and ostracization. And I attempted suicide. In the recovery of my suicide, I moved in with a brother. And all of a sudden in my life, I had sibling acceptance. However, in 1989, I went for my first surgery. And the day I came home, my brother said, "I'm sorry, Stacey, you need to move out." When the rubber hit the road, he couldn't handle it. Moving forward from that point on, I experienced more bigotry, more discrimination, more ostracization. And then my mother got very ill, and I would travel from Belleville to Lakefield every day to visit her at the nursing home. I had a chance to re-meet my brothers and sisters. And when my mom passed away, we had a receiving line at the funeral home. And I had a brother on one side and a sister on the other. And they introduced me, and this is my sister, Stacey. I never asked them to do it. They just did. I tried to have conversations with them about why, but they can't talk about it. So whether it's their own internalized guilt about the way that you treated me or what, I'm not really sure. But today I have a tremendous amount of family acceptance and much love. As I mentioned, I was participating in the first ever Toronto Pride in 1972, and these photographs are from that era, from that day. And you can see that we had a couple of hundred people in our parade or march at that time. We were marching in protest against the way that we were treated. We were not parading in celebration like we do today.
We were yelling things like, "We're here, we're queer, get used to it." When do we want it? Now! Well, in 1972, when I marched with a bullhorn at the front of the Gay Pride Parade, I was 6 foot, I had long hair.
Both long-haired and radical.
That's right, those radicals. And there weren't very many people on the street because we were it. It wasn't like Gay Pride now where there's as many people watching as marching. It was just us.
It was fun because you had taken control of your life, which other people said you shouldn't have control of because you were sick or diseased. But we were saying, no, we're not. In fact, we're going to change the way society views us. And starting here, right now, starting here and now.
I did go to 52 Division, and the cop was a really nice guy. I mean, he was a very sweet guy, and he was deeply embarrassed at talking to us because he'd never heard of gay before. But finally, he looked me in the eye, and he said, "I just have to ask you, do you really believe in this cause?" And I said, "Well, yeah, that's why we're having the parade." And he said, "And you're really going to march down the street saying that you're, you know?" And I said, "Well, yeah, that's what we're going to do."
I've seen lots of funny things
in comparison to today. 2019, 3.3 million people in the crowd, over 150,000 marchers in the parade. What a celebration of success. Are we perfect? Not yet. We're working on it. In 2018, I was awarded the Women's Leadership Award from the House of Commons for my work in the correctional services industry. What a great honor this is as the first trans woman to ever have this on a Canadian designation. The pride flag, it's not just a pretty flag. In fact, when we see the flag, it represents that this is a safe place for people. It's an international recognized symbol of safety and security for people from the LGBTQ2S community to be accepted for who we are. For many years, the rainbow flag has been a symbol of our representation of our pride. And to celebrate the Stonewall riots in that first movie in 1994, New York created this mile-long flag which required 1,000 people to carry it. The flag is not just a pretty flag, it has a tremendous amount of meaning, and every color of the flag has meaning. Red for life, orange for healing, yellow for sunlight, green for nature, blue for serenity, and the purple or the magenta is for our spirit. When I see the flag, I see diversity. It talks about everything that we are. It talks about our body, our mind, our Mother Earth, our serenity or our peace, and our spirit. The trans flag, on the other hand, is a little bit different. Typically blue for boys, pink for girls, and the white is for our trans people that identify as gender non-conforming, gender variant, gender fluid, gender queer, however they wish to identify. The flag's not only a symbol of our pride, but it's also a symbol of our hope. And huge progress has been made for our access to equal rights, as well as access to care. And in 2016, the government passed a Bill C-16, which is an anti-discrimination bill. And the rules and regulations and the protocols and guidelines in terms of trans care was changed. And general practitioners and doctors can now prescribe HRTs or hormone replacement therapies and recommend for the surgery to happen. It should be noted that even today, many anti-gay opponents are increasingly becoming more and more frustrated because their hate biases can no longer defeat the love in the community. Things aren't perfect yet, but as we progress, the movements we are making are extraordinary, and the rainbow affirms our hope for even a better future. To speak a little bit about and bring you up to date and help you be trans aware, dysphoria and coming out and accommodating and supporting them. So what is gender? Gender is what's between our ears, whereas sex is what's between our legs. And even that's not true, because if we look up the word sex in the dictionary, it's a verb. It's an activity for self-gratification or procreation. Biological sex is based on our physical attributes, such as our sex hormones and our hormones and internal reproduction and external genitalia. Whereas gender is the concept of our identity based on our roles and our behaviors and our activities and how we present ourselves. The word trans or transgender is an umbrella term used to identify someone's gender. It talks about their expression or behaviors, and it's different than that typically associated with our assigned sex at birth. It comes from the Latin origin, and it means on the other side. When we are born, the doctor looks at the baby based on the genitalia only. That doctor will say, "Congratulations, mom, dad, you have a baby boy or a baby girl," based solely on the external appendages, and it has nothing to do with that child. So when we look at that as an opportunity to understand trans, we can see that that's really not what it's about. Being transgender or transsexual or gender non-conforming, it's a matter of diversity. It's not pathology. And that was written in the WayPath 2011 documents. WAPAS stands for the World Professional Association for Transgender Health. And they work very closely with the WHO, or the World Health Organization, to set the protocols and guidelines for trans care in Canada. We're going to speak a little bit about the gender binary. When we think of a binary, we think of a straight line with a definitive start and a definitive end. And you can see that at the bottom of the picture here. So on one end, we have the male, and typically males use he, him, and his for pronouns. And on the other end of the binary, we have female, and most females use she, hers, and hers. So that's a typical binary, but we've come to realize that we have everything in between. This we call the spectrum, LGBTQ2S. Well, I was doing a presentation one day to a group of children, and I had the screen up, and this little 12-year-old girl said, "Stacey, what does the LGBTQ2S mean? And what if we forget somebody?" I said, "That's a great question." So I started. L for lesbian, G for gay, B for bisexual. She stopped me dead in my tracks. She said, "I know all that, but what does it mean? And what if we forget somebody?" I said, "Okay, Justine, that's a really good question. What should we call it?" And she said, "In my circle of friends, we use the word SAGA, saga." And I said, "Okay, what does saga stand for?" "Sexuality and gender acceptance," said this child with a grin ear to ear. And it really made me realize that I really need to pay attention to the power of our youth. It impressed me so much that I used that word at the beginning of my new agency, Saga LGBT Education and Support Services of Canada Incorporated. Moving forward, the T in that acronym. That acronym, by the way, is called the Campbell's soup, or the alphabet soup, rather, not Campbell's, but the alphabet soup. The T stands for trans, and the Q is for our questioning or our queer community. And most of the questioning or queer community are those gender non-conforming, gender variant, gender fluid, gender queer, however they wish to identify. And most of them use they, them, and theirs as pronouns. Now that's really difficult for people to understand because they, them, and theirs are plurals. How can one person be three? Well, let me explain it. Some days our gender non-conforming feel masculine. Other days our gender non-conforming feel feminine. But most days they feel like themselves and their selves. Hence, they, them, and theirs. The 2S is for two-spirit. And I will explain a little bit about that very shortly. The APP are for representation of anything that somebody wishes to identify, whether it be asexual, polyamorous, polymorous, or polygamy, or whatever it is. It's an opportunity for people to express. Terminology is vast and ever evolving, and we know that as words and language changes. I am not going to go through the list here because it's quite extensive. I have provided you a paper document of 3 pages of terminology and definitions that I would invite you to read over so that you have those words and definitions as an opportunity of conversation for when you are dealing with somebody from the community. However, I am going to speak about cisgender. Most people don't know what cisgender means. Again, it comes from the Latin, and it means on the same side. Cisgender is someone whose gender identity and presentation is consistent with their assigned sex at birth. Intersex, on the other hand, is quite different. And a lot of people misconstrue, or the misconception that intersex is the same as hermaphroditism. That's not true. A hermaphrodite is somebody who has complete reproduction, both genitalia and organs of both sexes. Whereas an intersex person is a person who is born with their anatomy and their reproduction organs in an ambiguous manner. And that's not distinctly male or female. Gender dysphoria, I'm going to speak about very shortly, so I'm not going to get into that. And transition is what we must do in order to change from one side to the other. So it can include, but it's not restricted to, hormone replacement therapies and surgeries. It is not absolutely necessary that somebody has HRT or surgery to identify as trans. And I know many, many trans people that are not medically capable of having these surgeries or being on hormones. That does not negate them from being who they are. As I said, the definitions are many and long. So I invite you again to have a look at that document. It's 3 pages long, and there's the key words that I have extrapolated from actually 16 pages of terminology. But I feel that these are the ones that are more set to what you may hear or experience out in the field. This is the DSM-5 302.85. It is the clinical diagnosis for somebody to have gender dysphoria. It is an absolute requirement in order for a doctor to prescribe hormones or recommend for surgery. It was established by the World Health Organization in conjunction with WAPATH, and a great deal of consideration has been put into creating this as the protocol and guidelines for trans care.
And I can't change, even if I tried, even if I wanted to. And I can't change, even if I tried, even if I wanted to. My love, my love, my love, she keeps me warm. She keeps me warm. She keeps me warm. She keeps me warm. And I can't change, even if I tried, even if I wanted to. My love, my love, my love, she keeps me warm. She keeps me warm. She keeps me warm. She keeps me warm. I can't change, even if I tried, even if I wanted to. My love, my love, my love, she keeps me warm. 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 She keeps me warm.
heart doesn't see race.
Love has no age limit.
We are neighbors and best friends.
We all have different religions, but we have universal love as well.
I love my sister.
Love is love.
Our family is no less than any other family.
So, audience, what was the purpose of this video? Please use your Q&A chat to respond to that question. What was the purpose of it? Well, I'm sorry, Dakota. Yeah, it does that too. Love includes everybody. That's right, yeah. Love is love. Absolutely. Some great answers there. The main purpose of it was that love has no labels. Did this video in any way show us anything about cultural diversity? Challenges biases. I like that. Yeah. That love has no limits and boundaries. Absolutely, it did in many, many ways. It talked about gender. It spoke about people with disabilities, various religions, different authenticities, and age. It was all part of that. So what was the theme of the video? The theme of the video was that we're all the same inside. Could we see if those people were male or female based on their skeletal pictures? Absolutely not. Could we see the color of their skin? Absolutely not. Could we see their religion? Absolutely not. Could we see if they were people with disabilities? Absolutely not. That just goes to show you that we are all the same inside, regardless of what we express on the outside. Does that make sense for people? I hope that helps you. I understand that. Our one planet, our Mother Earth, and on her we have 7 continents with 195 countries and 7.1 billion people. Please remember that 7.1 billion number because I'm going to speak to it very shortly. In order to have that number of people on our planet, we need diversity. What is diversity? We hear this word all the time. Diversity is about being different or being our individual self, valuing each other, regardless of our skin, our ideologies, our talents, or even how old we are. That's what diversity is. So why should this matter to you? It should matter to you because many from our community are denied jobs and services and promotions and accommodations based on our sexual orientation or our gender identity. And I'll speak personally to that. I have 6 college diplomas and 2 university degrees, and I couldn't get a job. I don't know how many times I heard from HR professionals, you're not a good fit. Why am I not a good fit? Because I don't fit what your perception of what a woman should look like or sound like? They would never answer me. Of course not, for fear of discrimination. Because even today, many LGBT people are beaten and murdered for being who we are. And we read about this on social media on a daily basis. Because of biases, we're made to feel uncomfortable when we show affection to our partner, especially in a same-sex relationship. Why is it okay for a husband and wife or a man and woman to pull up to the train station, give each other a kiss goodbye, and it's perfectly okay? But it's not okay for 2 guys to pull up to the train station and kiss each other goodbye. Because LGBT materials are, in many cases, banned or censored from our school boards. And this dynamic and mentality is changing, and I am ever so pleased about that. 3 years ago, I was invited to be part of an organization within one of our school boards with 93 schools, and we rewrote the policies and guidelines for trans and LGBT care within the school system. That September, we unrolled 5 new training videos that were all part of the professional development days for not only the principals and administration, but also the teachers and the custodial staff, everybody that was involved in the care of our children and youth in our school systems. Because our relationships remain unrecognized in hundreds of federal, state, provincial, and territorial laws, and in some states and countries, they prohibit same-sex marriages, and in some countries, they will actually kill you for being LGBT. The most important reason why it should matter to you is because the LGBT community is disproportionately at risk of suicide, and 77% will consider. Let's take that 7.1 billion people. Okay, in 2012, Transpulse News did a study that identified 10% of the population identified as LGBT. 7.1 billion people equates to 710 million people will consider suicide. These are huge numbers. And 45% will actually attempt. Let's say 50%, just to make it easier. If we take 50% of that 710 million people, we're looking at 350 million people that are at risk of actually attempting suicide. And for the most part, it's because of rejection and unacceptance from family members, from friends, and people who think they're trying to help us. How can we best assist somebody in their LGBT journey? The most important thing to do is to refrain from making an assumption. We don't know what someone's sexual orientation or their gender identity is based on their appearance. It's also important to remember that not everybody is heterosexual or straight. Treat all people as individuals and that we have many roles and identities. It's essential that you use your effective communication skills and remember that personal information is protected by privacy and confidentiality. Try to use neutral and inclusive language with people. Example, partner or guardian instead of husband or wife or parent. And why is that important? Think of a child that has been in this under care or a member of the ward, and they are now with caregivers. Let's ask that child about their parents. That child doesn't have parents. What we could do has created a spiral effect of mental health issues and depression and anxiety, which could lead to suicidality. Listen to and reflect the person's choice of language when they're describing their sexual orientation or their gender identity, or even their relationship with their partner. Always be honest. If you have little experience in dealing with somebody from the LGBT community, or you're anxious and you don't want to offend, that's great. Thank you for that. But let us know that. Say, you're working towards understanding and there's some areas that you're still learning about. And this helps create a safe dialogue and a bond is created. And when we create that bond, possibilities are endless. If you're unsure of somebody's gender identity, ask a neutral question. How would you like me to address you? What pronouns do you prefer me to use when I speak of you? Pretty simple, but open. Work towards understanding the meta terms that describe LGBT people and their lifestyles. And that's one of the reasons I've given you that 3-page document of definitions and expressions. Recognize that there are many terms that are derogative and hurtful and indicate a clinical or a medical condition. For example, the word homosexual or transgendered. When we put an ED on the word, we make it a past tense. I am not a person of the past. I am very much here in front of you today. Not only that, when we add that ED, it makes it sound like we have a disease. Oh, don't go near them. They're transgendered, right? You can't catch being trans from being a trans person. So it's crazy. So try to be aware of that. Be mindful of the power of nonverbal signs to the community, such as the pride flag or rainbows, or sometimes even the pink triangle. And by displaying these in your office or your classroom or on your binder or on your working materials, it will communicate that you support the LGBT community. It knocks down barriers. And as I said earlier, it's an international recognized symbol of safety and security for the LGBT community. Create a welcoming environment. Put those posters and flags and stickers up. Attend events. Be an ally. As you can see from the video at the beginning, 3.3 million people in Toronto streets to celebrate Pride. Recognize the difference between tolerance and acceptance, and celebration and advocacy. Significant differences between those. Reflect on your own practice. Do you advocate for LGBT inclusivity? Do you challenge homophobic and heterosexualist comments and jokes? Reflect on your limits of understanding and seek training within your organization or company. Advocate for that education. I'm just going to give you a little, for instance, here. How many of you have been at a party or a gathering and somebody will say, hey, did you hear the joke about? What is that joke about? That joke is about sex, religion, authenticity, color of skin, all those negative things that are so against the diversity of people in our world. Understand the effects of that heterosexualism in your workplace and provide support to your fellow workers and colleagues, and stand up against workplace bullying and discrimination and hatred. Are your coworkers out, or are they afraid to because of what we experience? They feel intimidated. I'm going to share a little story there. So as the coordinator for the trans group, we provide a safe place for people. And in order for somebody to come to our group, I have an intake process where I meet with the individuals and before they are allowed to come to the group. I got a phone call one day from a mom, said, yeah, I have a 12-year-old boy who thinks he's a girl. Okay, that's great. Thank you for your call. And I can tell right away that from her lack of understanding, she had no conception of trans. So I went and met with mom and this child, beautiful little girl. And we're sitting there in their kitchen having a cup of tea and a conversation. And I hear the rumble of a Harley pulling the driveway. Now I know that song or that sound because I ride too. So in walks this great big burly biker boy. He looks at me, he looks at his kid, he looks at me again, and he says, oh, what do we got here, a fag convention? Well, I stood up in his face. I said, John, you and I need to go in the other room and have a conversation. Within 5 minutes of this conversation, John was bawling his eyes out. Why? Because I made John realize his biggest fear. And his biggest fear was that he was going to lose his child. And I said to him, John, if you keep up this attitude that you have, you're going to put that child in the ground. And John lost it. Through the course of conversation with John, I come to find out that John works in an all-male facility, a steel mill, as a matter of fact. And every day they bash. Every day they bash the women, they bash the lesbians, they bash the gays, they bash the Chinese or the Japanese or the Sri Lankans or anybody. They called it the flavor of the day. And I said to John, John, you need to stop it. You need to stop it in yourself, first of all, because you're bringing it home. But secondly, because you're allowing it to continue. About 3 weeks after that conversation with John, I got a phone call from the CEO of that company. He said to me, Stacey, I don't know what you said to John, but whatever you said to John, my production is up 35%, and these guys are working in harmony with each other. I said to him, that's wonderful. I didn't say anything in particular. I just allowed John the opportunity to make a decision about what is said and how it's received. And that's changed the dynamic in your workforce. When somebody comes out to you or discloses that they are LGBT, thank them for having the courage to tell you. And keep in mind that we can't accurately predict how you're going to respond to that, as is the case with my brother when I came home from surgery. Remember that we've lived in a society that teaches intolerance against LGBT people. And therefore, by telling you, the person is putting a tremendous amount of trust in a very few words. And at the point of disclosure, there's a very real possibility that we're going to lose you as a family member, as a friend, as a coworker, as a counselor, as somebody that we look up to. Try not to judge a person. If you have your own strong religious or other beliefs, that's fine. Keep them to yourself. Ensure that you respect the person's confidentiality and tell them that you care about them no matter what. Some helpful responses for discussions around LGBT identity. It's okay if you're LGBT identified. Thank you for sharing. I can only imagine how difficult that was for you. As a person from the LGBT community, what are some of the things that you worry about the most? What kinds of support or help do you think you need? Not what kind of support or help can I give you. It's not up to you. It's up to them. Allow them to be part of that conversation. There's damaging statements, and we hear about these continuously. And, you know, I get angry about them, but I also have to laugh because some of them are so bizarre. How do you know? Well, how do you know you're straight? Are you sure? Well, I think, yes, in my situation, you know, having been trans for over 50 years, yeah, I am sure. Oh, you're too young to make a decision like that. I hear that constantly from parents of youth. It is proven that a child as young as 3 years of age can identify their gender, which may not be conforming to what they were assigned at birth. How can you know if you've never had sex with somebody of the opposite sex? Well, that's pretty simple because it's not about sex. Gender is not sex. Gender is what's between our ears, how we see ourselves in society. Sex is about who we go to bed with or how we go to bed. Oh, it's just a phase you're going through. Don't worry about it. How bizarre is that? Does a phase last for 54 years in my case? No. A lot of people experiment or fantasize. It doesn't mean you're LGBT. That could be true, but for the most part, I would think if that you've had relations with the same sex or both, then you're already well on your way to being part of the LGBT community. It's fine that you told me, but don't tell anybody else. Where is that fear coming from? That fear is so self-internalized that you don't want anybody else to know that your child or brother or sister or aunt or uncle or parent is trans or LGBT people because you don't want to experience what they do. And what we experience is discrimination, hatred, and bigotry on a daily basis. So you try to protect yourself by telling them not to tell anybody else. And the last one that I have to laugh at is maybe you just haven't met the right person yet. There's tremendous amounts of issues that affect our community every day. The stigma of being LGBT, homophobia, transphobia, hatred, bigotry, ostracization, suicidality, being Native or Two-Spirit, lack of employment, lack of trans competent doctors and lack of trans community services, misgendering, ignorance, lack of understanding, and a tremendous amount of lack of acceptance. I am not afraid of my truth anymore, and I will not omit pieces of me to make you comfortable. As a Two-Spirit person, I am awarded the opportunity to be one of the providers. In my culture, in the 1600s, we were silenced for a very long time for fear of prosecution. When the white man infiltrated our lands here, we were put under the carpet. It's only in the last 50 to 70 years that we've been allowed to come out. But in doing so, our community and our elders have recognized us to be symbols and the carriers of the secret medicines. Not only have we been awarded the utmost security of that, but we are also seen as mentors and healers and educators. And with that, I wish to offer you some peace. O great Spirit, whose voice we hear in the winds, your breath gives life to our world. We need your strength and wisdom. Let us walk in your beauty and allow our eyes to behold the reds and the purples of your sunsets. Make our hands respect the things that you have made, and our ears sharp to hear the words that you say. Make us wise so that we may understand the things that you have taught us. Let us learn the lessons that you have hidden in every rock, every leaf, and every person. We seek strength, not to be greater than each other, but to combat our greatest enemy, ourselves. Make us ready to come to you with clean hands and straight eyes. So when our light fades, as the fading sun sets, that our spirit may come to you without shame or hurt. Two-Spirit is the modern term used by our Indigenous people to describe people of the LGBTQ2S community. And as I said earlier, we fulfill third gender ceremonial roles in our culture. It is a wonderful opportunity for me to have been here today with you. I truly wish each and every one of you huge success in your careers and in the opportunities of working with the LGBT community. That is the end of my presentation, but I would like to think that it's really just the beginning of you. Remember that knowledge is having the right question, but intelligence is asking the right questions. Thank you so much to each and every one of you people that have been here today to listen and hopefully learn from what we have experienced. Up on the board right now is all of my contact information. I invite each and every one of you to reach out to me. If I can ever be of any assistance, whether it be personal or through business, to provide you opportunity to successfully work with people of the LGBT community in a way that allows them the diversity and acceptance that we should all have. Thank you very much, everyone. We're going to open the floor there now, Trevor.
Yes, thank you so much. That was an absolutely wonderful presentation. And thank you for sharing your own personal story as well. We do have a few questions, but please, people, if anyone has any other questions, please feel free to type them into the Q&A box. I know that there was one question in the chat that asked about any kind of stickers or anything that you did mention if people wanted, for instance, a business to display that they're a welcoming business. If you know of any place that sells those kind of stickers or provides them.
So I have please reach out to me personally, either through email or one of those phone numbers that were posted up there. I have them available to you. And that was from an anonymous, I believe it was. Also, Dakota had asked about resources within the region for the Quinte area. Please contact me. We do have resources within our Quinte region. We run LGBT group here for children and youth. We run a trans group, and we also have our Bay of Quinte Pride. So please reach out to me. Thank you very much, Pooja.
Okay, and
so Stephanie, you had a really good question in terms of the DSM-5. At what age do they consider young adolescents? That's a really good question, and each and every person is so unique and individual. However, our gender identity clinics are geared towards our youth population, and our youth population is prepubescence. Prepubescence is the key to allow somebody to transition without risking the implications of the natural process in terms of gender. So, on the male spectrum, those, hereditary things such as beard growth and deep voice and male pattern baldness can be wiped away if we provide opportunity for that child to transition into a younger prepubescent stage. At what age is that? I think, according to our Ontario policies and protocols, I believe it's 12 years of age with parental consent. I hope that answers your question, Stephanie. And if not, please reach out to me. I have some more written information. And without parental consent, Danny, that same question, at what age can a youth transition? They cannot legally get on hormones or ask for surgeries until they are of legal age. I do know some doctors that have provided hormone replacement therapies to youth as young as 16. The thing about prescribing hormones is that it's informed consent. So based on the eligibility criteria and how well informed that person is, that doctor may feel comfortable enough to prescribe HRT to a youth of 16. I'm just reading the questions as we go here.
That's okay. I know
Thank
that
you
people
for your questions,
are
Cynthia.
asking about the slides. Those will be sent out, so don't worry, people will be getting the slides soon.
Okay.
So.
Thank you, Cynthia. Yes, that's a really good question. And, with COVID this year has really kind of, destroyed many of the group activities that we had, and we always met in person and whatnot. It has been an onerous task to try and assemble that on a virtual reality opportunity. But what I've been able to do in my trans group is, because I coordinate that group and I stay close in contact with each and every one of my participants almost on a weekly basis, that it has been a wonderful time for them to have that closeness and support that they've needed without being there in person. So there isn't a whole lot of opportunity for online opportunities, but there is some. Rainbow Health Ontario, which is part of the Sherburne Health medical team in Toronto, they have a number of training programs and groups, and there's opportunity for people to join that. I am a mentor for Rainbow Health Ontario. And so quite often people will go onto the mentorship page and find somebody that can provide them some resources and information. I think that does it. Oh, one more. When does it become performative when placing pride flags or pink triangles in places? My worry is that a lot of places simply put this out to be seen as accepting. And you know what? That's absolutely true. And it's really, really a shame on them that they want to capitalize on something that is so important. It's unfortunate, though, we can't control what people do. But what we can control is not the information we're receiving, but it's what we do with it.
Okay. I know that, let's see, again, for anyone who
One last one there. Sorry, one last question there, Trevor. Kirsten Mercier, in terms of that, please reach out to me, and absolutely, yes, I am open to and willing to come into your long-term care facility. Perhaps a lunch and learn or something like that might be a good opportunity to assemble staff and provide them the opportunity to be LGBT culturally competent. I know this is an ongoing situation within our long-term health care facilities. We do have a tremendous amount of lesbian and gay people that are aging, that are in these facilities. In some facilities, I actually run a program, and it's called Toys for Seniors. Yeah, you heard me right. It is toys for seniors, whether it be a dildo or whatever. People use these devices for self-pleasure. So absolutely, we need to address that. Just because you're 90 doesn't mean you don't have any sexuality left in you. So it's important that we address that. Last question, how do you feel, or how do you deal with parents' reactions when working with children and providing information on LGBT? I deal with this parents of LGBT children the same way that I'm dealing with you folks in your audience here. I am here for you. I am supportive of you, and I will answer any of your questions in any way that you feel that you need to have them answered.
Okay. Thank you, everyone. Thank you so much, Stacey. This was absolutely wonderful. I really appreciate it. And again, to everyone, you will be getting all of this material very shortly through email, and it will be posted along with the recording of the webinar on our website very soon, within the next day or so. So please look for it there. Thank you very much, everybody.
Thank you.